All right. All right. I think we're in the house. Yes.
We are in the digital building. Good evening, family. How's everything going?
Good. How are y'all?
Uh,
Well, we have a very special guest tonight, Kamilah Moore, the chair of the California Reparations Task Force. So we look forward to hearing from you tonight with any updates on the task force. And audience, we want to hear from you too. Give us a call and with your questions.
yes. Welcome to ETM Media Community Call In as my esteemed super duper production co-host Kim, along with the ultimate warrior Umoya, and of course the one and only Camilla Moore here, chair of the California Reparations Task Force. As Kim said, hey, like, share, subscribe, do all that good stuff. Do it right now. Like, share, subscribe. Make sure you are on our Twitter. You're on the Instagram. I think we're on TikTok too. Make sure you check out ETM Media on all of those amazing platforms. And as a part of the community engagement work that we are doing around the California Reparations Task Force, this historic Reparations Task Force, we are bringing you conversations with folks like none other than the people who are on the California Reparations Task Force. And today, as Kim said, for the third time, I'm going to say it, we have none other than chair of the task force, Kamilah Moore. Okay, Chris is going to set up.
All right. So everybody's looking forward to the show tonight. Before we get into it, let's find out what's been going on in the news this week.
You're up.
Hey, Dion, was just wondering if you could.
Hold on. Let's back up a little bit. You don't call Nick Saban Nick. Don't call me Dion now. Okay.
I call Nick Saban Nick.
Yeah, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't. That's a lie. If you call Nick Nick, you know you'll get cussed out on the spot. So don't do that to me. Treat me like Nick.
Okay, Dion.
All right.
Just
All right. So rest in power to Bob Moses. Robert Paris Moses was born January 23rd, 1935. He transitioned on July 25th, 2021, was an American educator and civil rights activist, known for his work as a leader of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee on Voter Education and Registration in Mississippi during the Civil Rights Movement, and is co-founding of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. He was a graduate of Hamilton College and completed a master's in philosophy at Harvard University. In 1982, Moses began developing the nationwide algebra project in the United States. He received a MacArthur Fellowship and other awards for his work, which emphasizes teaching algebra skills to minority students based on broad-based community organizing and collaboration with parents, teachers, and students. Ashe, ashe, ashe. May it rest in peace and power.
Rest in power. Naomi Osaka will leave Tokyo Olympics without a medal, loses in third round to Marketa Vondrousova. Oh, we just saw her light the torch there, and she's already going home. Naomi Osaka will leave the Tokyo 2020 Olympics without a medal as the four-time major champion was upset in the third round Tuesday by Marketa Vondrousova of the Czech Republic. Vondrousova, a 2019 French Open finalist, advances with the 6-1, 6-4 win. How disappointed I am. I mean, I'm disappointed in every loss, but I feel this like this one sucks more than others, Osaka said. Osaka, who had 32 unforced errors in the match, isn't the first big name to lose early in the women's draw. World number one and Wimbledon champion Ashley Barty of Australia lost in the opening round to Spain's Sarah Sorribes Toronto. Number 3 seed Ariana Sabalenka of Belarus also made an early exit, losing to Croatia's Donna Vecchi in the second round.
Yeah, Kim, you seem to always get the hard art.
I know. What's with it?
All right, let's see what I can do here. Simone Biles delivers powerful message to Olympic teammates after exiting gymnastics event. After Simone Biles withdrew from the 2021 Tokyo Olympics on Tuesday, she delivered a message to her teammates to motivate them prior to squaring off against the Russian Olympic Committee in the gymnastics team final. I'm sorry, I love you guys, but you're going to be just fine, Biles told her teammates. You guys have trained your whole entire life for this. It's fine. I've been to an Olympics. I'll be fine. This is your first. You go out there and kick a star. Okay. Biles, who is still eligible to compete in the individual all-around later in the week, told reporters that she wasn't injured, but she was, quote, dealing with a few things, end quote. No injury, thankfully, and that's why I took a step back because I didn't want to do something silly out there and get injured, Biles said via Olympics.com. I thought it was best that these girls took over and did the rest of the job, which they absolutely did. They're Olympic silver medalists. They should be really proud of themselves for how well they did.
Yes, looks like there'll be an opportunity to see her in individual rounds, but the most important thing is that she takes care of herself in this time. Pressure is building on Biden to do more for asylum seekers and migrants. On one side, he faces growing pressure from supporters who want his administration to stop turning away asylum seekers and to invest more political capital on creating a pathway to citizenship for the nation's 11 million undocumented immigrants. On the other side, critics want him to do more to stop what has turned into the largest wave of migrants arriving at the U.S. southern border in recent history, with border agents averaging 6,300 encounters with migrants every day last month. It's against this backdrop that Biden spoke Monday to the nation's largest Latino advocacy organizers, Unidos US. In pre-recorded remarks, Biden promised to continue to fight for undocumented Americans. My administration will always have your back, he declared. Some of Biden's supporters, like Ali Nurami of the National Immigration Forum, hoped his speech would be directed at not just his base, but more broadly to all American people, particularly the swing voters who are concerned about migration, yet recognize the value of immigrants in their communities. He has their back, huh? That sounds familiar. Sounds like what he said to Black people after he won the election.
Wah, wah. Radio host Larry Elder wins fight to enter California recall. Elder scored a swift court victory in Sacramento, where he challenged a decision by state election officials to block him from the September recall ballot. In a tweet, Elder wrote, "Victory. My next one will be on September 14th at the ballot box." He added, "This isn't just a victory for me, but a victory for the people of California, and not just those who favor the recall and support me, but all voters, including many who will come to know me."
White residents burned this California Chinatown to the ground. An apology came 145 years later. In the basement of Rain Salon in Antioch, a brick wall is a reminder of a dark past. More than a century ago, Chinese people built tunnels under the city because they were forbidden by law from going outside after sundown. Then white residents burned Chinatown to the ground. Today, few traces of the old Chinatown remain. Some tunnel entrances, such as the one on Rain, pull wood pilings in the San Joaquin River that were the foundations of houses. Many people strolling in the Bay Area city's quaint downtown are getting their hair cut at Rain, were unaware that a Chinatown once stood there. Antioch officials aim to change that, starting with a dramatic gesture. First, the city council apologized to all early Chinese immigrants and their descendants. An apology for dehumanization and injustice cannot erase the past, but admission of the wrongs committed can speed racial healing and reconciliation and help confront the ghosts of the past, the council said in a resolution passed unanimously in May. The council will also create a Chinatown Historic District and fund murals and museums, exhibits commemorating the city's Asian history.
Japanese American activists demand reparations for Black Americans. It pains writer and activist Tracy Kato Kuriyama to think of how her parents and grandparents were among 120,000 people who were forced into camps after Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor because of their Japanese ancestry. But she said it's even more overwhelming to think of how Black Americans have lived through centuries of injury and injustice. I can't even imagine having to reckon with understanding my family history to know that generation after generation after generation faced slavery and Jim Crow and systems of oppression. Kathy Masako, who joined the Japanese American redress movement as an activist in the 1970s, is now working with Black leaders in the reparations campaign. We never felt like we could sit back and say, oh, we're done, just because we won redress, said Masako, who co-chairs Nike for Civil Rights and Redress. There was always a feeling that we have to speak up to support no matter what because of our own understanding and experience. All right, I guess I'll take this one too. Last week tonight, John Oliver makes case for housing reparations for Black Americans. Make it right by paying what you owe. The Firebrand host dove into the history of housing discrimination in the United States by detailing the noxious history of racial covenants in the South that prevented home sales to Blacks and how some of those bylaws exist to this day. Oliver pointed out this segregation was accelerated when the federal government stepped in with the ushering of government programs such as the Homeowners Loan Corporation Act and founding of institutions like the Federal Housing Authority.
That's in the news.
And
That's in the news.
We're in the news, and we're back, family. True, Kim. Kudos to you. You always get those. I mean, I had one or two, hard names I had to pronounce, but man, they went in on you with this one.
Yeah, that's what happens when the international news is right up at the top.
Yep. All right, so shall we get into it? Chris, would you like to introduce our wonderful guest here?
Yeah, definitely. And once again, thanks everybody for joining. Like, share, subscribe. Also, at a certain point in the next few seconds or so, a number will appear in the crawl there because this is community call-in, and so you get to call in and ask your own questions and do your own talking every Tuesday, of course, here on ETM Media. And of course, tonight we have none other than, once again, the chair of the California Reparations Task Force. Now, I have some questions in my mind, and really, like I was saying to the folks before we started, really, I do want to just talk a lot about like your background, and then also a lot about your plan that you actually presented at the last California Reparations Task Force meeting, which if folks haven't seen that, you can check out right here on ETM Media, because we live streamed every single one of the California Reparations Task Force meetings. And big shout out to Kim and Yamoya, for making that happen. Kim, you were a soldier, there, live streaming the whole thing for 7 hours straight. Kim sat there and like live streamed the whole thing. And I sat and moderated the chat. But like, big shout out to you, Kim. So if you haven't seen the first or the second California Reparations Task Force meeting, please go ahead and check that out right here on ETM Media. Now, we are doing community engagement. We're doing informing. We're doing, education to our community about this task force. So, like I said, your background and the plan, and then really, I do want to just get some thoughts from you about your vision for what this ultimately becomes. As I said, as we got started. So, and then I know Kim and Yamoya will have some things to add to that, and then also folks in the chat, right? Folks in the comments will have some things to add to that too. So, let's get started, shall we?
Chris,
Kamilah,
yeah,
congratulations.
Chris, before we go in, should we do a brief kind of bio?
Yes.
Kamilah, before we go on.
Yes, please do.
All right. Kamilah Moore is a repertory justice scholar and attorney with a specialization in entertainment and intellectual property transactions. As a law student, Moore contributed to human rights reports related to domestic and international human rights issues, including but not limited to racial inequality in Brazil, the human right to sanitation in Lowndes County, Alabama, USA, and the human right to remedy for indigenous Black women affected by racialized gender violence in Papua New Guinea. While studying abroad at the University of Amsterdam, Moore wrote a master thesis exploring the intersections between international law and reparatory justice for the transatlantic slave trade, chattel slavery, and their legacies. She earned a Juris Doctor degree from Columbia Law School in New York City, a Master of Laws degree in International Criminal Law from the University of Amsterdam, and a bachelor's degree from the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA. Go Pac 12. I think when I graduated, it was Pac 10. Yeah. Kamilah Moore was appointed to the Reparations Task Force by Speaker of the Assembly, Anthony Rendon. All right. So
Yeah.
hopefully that bio did you some justice.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you all. It's a pleasure to be here. I think that was a pretty good overview of my background. But just to personalize my story just a bit, for my, Black American family, right? In terms of, let's say, like the Great Migration story, right? I come from folks who were enslaved in the Deep South, Alabama, Mississippi, Texas, and Louisiana. I was primarily, obviously, raised by my mother in a single parent household, primarily. And my mother's family came from Chula, Mississippi. It's still to this day the poorest town and the poorest county in the poorest state, Chula County, Mississippi. And so my grandmother, she left Mississippi, Chula County, to California in the early 40s. She was the only child. She left to California for a better life, and her mother, which was my great grandmother, followed her soon after, about a year later, and brought actually all of my grandmother's children with her. My great grandmother did that. So yeah, my grandmother had 6 children. One of them was my mother. And so, for instance, my grandmother had to do what she could in Los Angeles to make a way. My great grandmother, when she came to Los Angeles, was a domestic worker, working for, cooking and cleaning, primarily for Hollywood executives, white folks, having to go all the way from the projects in the east side of Los Angeles to West LA to pretty much, serve, to be a domestic worker. I've had family, that's tracing from the 40s to the 60s, but, I've had family within, my mother's side, right, who have been impacted by, the war on drugs, mass incarceration. And so in terms of like what brought me to my work in terms of reparations, my bio that was just read, kind of told that story in terms of my educational background, going to UCLA, then going to Columbia Law School, writing a master's thesis on reparations at the University of Amsterdam. But I think what really completes the story as to kind of why I'm in the reparations space is really more of my personal story and kind of where I came from, and my family's story and history from being internal refugees, fleeing the Deep South for better opportunities in California, only to kind of see, in reality, to see barriers to opportunity in the state as well. So it's kind of a full story. Now, I'm third, fourth. Well, technically, I guess I'm a second generation Californian. And I'm placed in a unique position to kind of help tell that story and tell other people's stories that are, similarly situated to me, and then help to rectify some of the harms that, our lineage has faced.
Wow. Yeah. So just actually, I actually want to follow up on this background question here, because one, thank you for laying all that out. I didn't know actually all of that about your own personal story, and I think it's important for folks out here in the California community to get to know you, right, and to hear your story, right? Because it's a story that we all share in many ways. I get, I'm a part of a kind of, migration to California myself, but very different than the one that, you're, that, folks in your family, went through, and different from folks, we have someone who we connect with pretty often in our work, Jonathan Burgess, right? Whose, family, was a part of that first wave of Black folks, one of the first Black families in the state of California, right? But just on this point about your background and how you've been doing reparations work in your own, education and professional work, as a choice, and what was it like to be chosen to be the chair of the task force, right? I thought your background made you the most qualified person because you actively, like on your own, chose to work on reparations, in your own personal and professional, world before this was even happening. So what was it like for you to, be named chair? Were you expecting it? Like, what was it like for you?
I wouldn't say I was expecting it, but I definitely tried my best to prepare to present myself and to put my best foot forward, because I recognize the similar things that, I was unique in the sense that, I dedicated most of my law school career and studies to studying reparations, and, things like that. So, it was a surreal experience, but, it's an honor and a privilege, but it was surreal.
I have a question. So in your reparations studies, was there like a whole class dedicated to studying reparations? I mean, how many were in your class, and what was the, makeup, the diversity of the class?
Oh, that's a really good question. So, I decided to go to the law school that I chose because they had a reputation for international law. And I knew that that was something that I was interested in. And I knew that that was a ripe space to talk about reparations, just because, I was watching the news and consuming the news and looking into different human rights cases around the world. And I kind of understood how, international law could be a useful tool in applying it, in applying that to some of the harms that Black Americans have gone through. So I knew that whatever law school that I chose, I wanted them to have a really strong international law program for that purpose. And so, Sarah, fortunately, I got into Columbia. But the interesting part of this story is that when I went to Columbia, they have the academic curriculum for like years out. So you can see what's offered and proposed. And you can see what has been offered and proposed in the past. So law school is 3 years. And so I looked forward ahead 3 years and I noticed that there were no classes offered for reparations. But I noticed also in looking back at the past curriculums that they had courses on reparations in the past. And so when I was like a 1L, that's what they call the first year students. When I was a 1L at law school, I just contacted the academic vice provost, which, coordinates the curriculum for the different academic school years. And I just reached out to him and said, I want a course in reparations before I graduate and I need you to make it happen. And so he happily obliged. And so before I graduated, I took a course from a professor named Jonathan Bush. He is an international law expert. He's written books and articles, particularly on the Nuremberg trials, in relation to reparations for the Holocaust victims. But he has expertise on reparations as a concept under international law more broadly. And so I took his course on reparations. We cultivated a relationship. I'm still connected with him to this very day. But then also to supplement that course, I applied to a dual degree program at the University of Amsterdam. So in my third year of law school, my final year of law school, the fall semester, I actually studied abroad, went to Amsterdam, and took technically a full year course on international criminal law. So in addition to the traditional Juris Doctorate degree that I got from Columbia Law School, whereby I took that course on reparations with Professor Bush, I also completed that master thesis through the University of Amsterdam to obtain an additional degree called a Master of Laws in International Criminal Law. So through that program, I took lots of different courses related to reparations. Like I took courses on genocide, on war crimes, on international procedural law and international substantive law, a course on evidence, things like that. And so, so I'll just stop there, but that's kind of the long story.
Did you know at the time when you were taking these courses that how you were going to apply them, that you were going to, try to actually enact reparations legislation like you're doing now?
No, actually, I had no idea. I thought the pinnacle of maybe my work would have been the thesis, to be honest. And when I graduated, I was thinking of ways to kind of utilize the thesis, whether that's presenting it at academic conferences, which I'm still, planning to do. But, always, I didn't think that we would have a task force of this magnitude. I graduated in 2019. So I didn't really necessarily know at the time. I was just doing it because I was passionate about it, and I knew that it would be useful in some way.
Definitely. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question, one or two. So when your family or your friends, first of all, did you tell them that you were studying reparations? One, and what was the response and feedback? Because sometimes when people say, "Hey, you're studying reparations, why don't you just become a doctor anyway?" That's a waste of time. So
that's a good question. Well, in terms of feedback, so my family has always been supportive. I kind of always have found myself in kind of activist and organizing spaces. So when I told them I want to be taken seriously in the reparations space, they're like, okay, yeah, like what's new? But I will say that, discussing the concept of reparations at the law school that I went to, I found it to be more of, I guess you could say it was just surprisingly difficult to kind of, even within Black spaces, and at that particular law school, but I guess you could extrapolate that to elite spaces, because again, Columbia Law School, just to keep it real, it's an Ivy League law school. The types of people there are kind of handpicked, cherry-picked, even the Black people. And so I remember I hosted an event on reparations, and it was very well attended. A lot of non-Black people came, but I received a lot of pushback from, Black people at that institution, even administrators and students, who thought that, reparations can never happen, who thought that I was, that this was just a fool's errand to even bring up these types of discussions in a law school setting, which is pretty unfortunate. But hey. We see who is not a fool's errand, right? We see now. Excuse me.
Yeah, Chris, I don't know if you want to ask any more questions, but I can hold my questions for later if you want me to.
No, brother, go ahead, brother. No, go ahead, brother. Because I am enjoying everything that I'm hearing. So please go on and ahead.
Okay. Well, I know, and the reason why I asked you is because oftentimes, I will kind of get the same knee-jerk response even from my own people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they have this thing where it's like, well, reparations can never happen. The government won't pay for it. It's too much. So, like, when people like respond that way to you, like, what do you tell them? Like, it's too expensive. How are we going to like get this information? I mean, it's such a long time ago, and it's too expensive. But what's your response to that?
Well, I just a lot of the common retorts is like, what if our ancestors who were enslaved like never resisted and said, slavery would never end? Like, would we'd be here today, right? It's like similar arguments that we have to reject fundamentally. But then also, and when people talk like that, I like to just point them to the experts, right? Like point them to folks like Dr. Darity and Kirsten Mullen. Point them to folks on the ground who are doing this work, like you all. Yeah, that's kind of my strategy. I just kind of like try to dissuade the silly arguments and provide them with resources. Also point them to, initiatives and commissions that are already in the works, like this task force.
Okay, and I noticed in your bio, you had some entertainment experience. Now it's up to you if you want to answer this question or not, because I've been in the entertainment industry for a long time. What is do you think somehow, some way the entertainment industry can also be involved in the reparations movement? Do you think there's some kind of repair and redress in the entertainment industry as well?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. So when I went to UCLA, I actually minored in film. It wasn't my major, it was just my minor, but I was able to take some courses on it. And one of the courses I took was, I think it's a course on American film or something like that. But one of the things I learned in that course was about the film The Birth of a Nation, right, by D.W. Griffith, right? And that is known to be the first film in American history, like the first American film. As we know, that film is fundamentally racist. It was about like this, this white man dressed in blackface, but it was, about this, quote unquote, black man coming to ravage a white woman. And then, the white town had to, come and save her. And actually the KKK rallied behind this movie like that. Like the Birth of the Nation as a film was a mobilizing tactic for the KKK. And so there you can even see the intersections or the connections between the harms done to Black Americans in this country, and how Hollywood and how the film industry has played a role in that, either consciously or unconsciously. So I definitely think, as someone who has studied film, as someone who has consumed film, as we all have, we can probably point to projects or point to things where we can see that there needs to be a larger discussion around potential repair in the industry. And, as a quick plug, we will have, as part of a public hearing, a full day on the entertainment industry and on arts and sports. So we can really delve deep and see the past barriers and the current barriers for Black folks in those industries.
All right. Yeah, I think that's
Fire.
it for me for now. Yeah, it was definitely fire. Thank you.
That was fire.
Yeah, I mean, I read a whole article on how Hollywood is losing money just because they undervalue a Black product, underpay Black people. I mean, they rather lose money than, pay Black people a fair market rate. So have to dig those articles up. And maybe that's a good idea to start digging these articles up for when the task force talks about them, to present that information in the testimony.
Yeah, that would be great.
So I was actually, and Kim, what you just said actually just added to what I was going to say. It was a perfect segue, because what Kamilah just talked about was she just mentioned one of the one of the planned topic hearings for one of the upcoming meetings. And I actually want to circle back to talk about some of the discussion around what this task force is going to be talking about and when that went on at the last Reparations Task Force meeting, which, once again, shameless plug, you can check out right here on ETM Media, and also make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Right. So I have as part of our community engagement work, here with ETM and also with CJEC, Coalition for a Just and Equitable California. Shout out to the CJEC family. So we were at the last meeting. We heard your plan. There were some big points to your plan. That one we did discuss here. I think on our last show we did talk at least about the overview, points in your plan, and I want to key in on some of those and then just give you some time to talk about some pieces of that and maybe just get some of your thinking about some of the key points of your plan. And once again, this is the plan for the public hearings and for the meeting topics and for the meeting schedule that was discussed at the last California Reparations Task Force hearing. So by way of overview, as we know from the law that started or created this task force, the law that we call AB 3121, there were at least 10 meetings put into that law, right? At least 10 public meetings, right? And we've had 2 public meetings, and there's questions right now about whether or not those meetings would or should count toward the 10 because of the fact that they were virtual and not really costing any money, right? So that's one thing to say, and I want to just put a pin on that. But some of the other points you that are in your plan that folks should know are, one, that all future public hearings be changed from 1 day to 2 days, right? And we spend at least 5 hearings dedicated to information gathering, and then at least 4 hearings dedicated to developing and presenting reparations proposals under the international law standards, which, for those of you who are not so familiar, are incorporate and bring in the 5 forms of reparations: compensation, restitution, rehabilitation, satisfaction, and guarantees of non-performance. As also a part of your proposal overview, all public hearings will and should include expert testimony, public testimony, and public comment, right? So I want to stop here. Can you just give folks an idea or an understanding about the thinking behind some of those parts of your plan?
Yes. So just to give a quick recap, right? And so our first meeting for the task force was June 1st. And it was primarily organized by the DOJ because, as people know, the task force is governed by the Bagley-Keene Act, which provides certain standards for transparency and notice to the public. And so since June 1st was the first time, the 9 task force members could convene, obviously we weren't doing any, business before that first convening. And so if you all, and I know we all were at the first meeting and we saw that the California DOJ, or staff, as I'll call them, presented their own proposal for the public hearing schedule. That was based on some of the topics, or based on the topics for the written report that will also be released as a function of this task force, right? And so again, at the meeting, there was an open discussion about the staff's proposal for the public hearing plan, and there was a vote by the majority of task force members to reject staff's proposal for the public hearing plan and to come up with something new based on the ideas of the task force primarily. And so also in that meeting, right, Member Holder, she led, a discussion whereby, she took down topics, suggestions from task force members, right? She just led an exercise after we rejected staff's proposal, kind of seeking for new ideas, seeking ideas that weren't necessarily on the proposal that staff presented. And so in terms of the new plan that was adopted at our second meeting in this month in July, what I seek to do was to incorporate, right, to really retain a lot of what staff proposed, because a lot of what they propose has to be in the written report anyway. So, it's important to give the public an opportunity to kind of see in real time some of the things that will eventually be put into the report. So again, the new proposal incorporates a lot of the ideas that the California DOJ proposed, but in addition, it also includes those ideas that that we came up with in the discussion that Member Holder led. In addition to those topics, I also, made it a point to, try to really listen into public comment, from the public emails that we receive from public calls, transcripts from public calls, things like that, public comment from the actual meetings themselves, to ascertain some topics that we could also include in the public hearing. So just to make a long story short, the new proposal, or the new plan rather, public hearing plan, incorporates ideas from probably 3 major sources, right? California DOJ's proposal, ideas from task force members, and ideas from the public, and of course some ideas of mine.
So I think to follow up on that, because I want to continue, one, thank you for giving that background, and also thank you for filling in some of those details for us. Continuing on the overview, right, of your plan, your plan also calls for the task force to receive and get what the plan calls requests for proposals, or ROPs, from stakeholders before each public hearing, right? And I thought this was really, really interesting, and I want to give you some time to talk about some of your thinking behind this. But before I do, I want to just flesh some of this out for the folks who are listening and watching. So one, we've been talking a lot about, hey, we want to see action, right? And we want to see this, actually create something on the ground, right? And so, I think the fact that your plan will be calling for proposals to be discussed at every single one of the hearings, right? I think is something that's really, really, really interesting, and I think really, really creative. Also, your plan or your ROPs would include, at a minimum, a proposal, a cost analysis, an implementation plan, and an explanation of how the proposals fit into one of the categories of repair. So I'm assuming that's the compensation, restitution, rehabilitation, satisfaction, and guarantees of non-performance, right? That international framework for what the forms of reparation should look like, right? And then also that at every meeting there would be a time set aside to acknowledge and briefly discuss previously submitted ROP. So one, talk to us about this proposals, ROP, really, really creative idea. You're totally muted.
Yeah,
Sorry, thank you. Oh, wow. Thanks for
that.
I just wanted to say, I'll preface my statements as something that I probably should have said earlier, but I'm speaking on behalf of myself, not on behalf of the task force. So there's that. But the ROPs, that's something that we implemented as a plan, but it's also still very much a work in progress. And again, speaking as an individual, and thinking through that a little bit more, again, this is conceptually, it would give individuals and organizations and groups the opportunity to develop proposals for reparations that they could then present to task force members for us to then consider, to potentially be put in the written report, to potentially be, proposed as a final recommendation or as a final proposal. And so, in thinking through this a little bit more, I understand having folks submit proposals, before, each task force, the timing of that might be an issue, right? So that's something that I'm, thinking through as an individual, how to rectify that. Also, Chris, you noted some of the quote unquote requirements for those submissions, like a cost analysis and budget and all those things. Also, as an individual thinking through that, I want the barriers of entry to be kind of low. I want us as community members to feel, comfortable to contribute to this process without, necessarily having to be, compete necessarily with maybe organizations or groups who have more resources, right? Like I really want to democratize this process. And so I don't necessarily, as an individual, I don't necessarily see like, a whole detailed like policy proposal plan being the requirement. I think the real goal is to maximize engagement from the community through this process. So the ROPs provide that opportunity.
Fine. Thank you. And I actually have, so I have one more question, and it's about the upcoming meetings, and then I do want to also ask you. So I actually have two more questions. So I do want to ask you about your vision ultimately, but the next sort of more technical question about this process and the meeting plan that you presented at the last California Reparations Task Force meeting. So you also proposed an actual calendar and actually with like meeting topics. There aren't specific dates for the actual next meetings yet, but there are tentative dates and sort of months and when they're sort of scheduled to be in the plan, and also specific topics that would be discussed in each of those 2 days, right? So I want to talk specifically about the upcoming meeting, which we expect to be in September, at least at this point. One, is there a public date that we can share yet? Just want to ask you. And then two, in the plan, the topic of the next meeting would be the transatlantic slave trade, the institution of slavery, and the impetus and implications of the Great Migration. So I'm reading from the plan here, from the actual screenshot of the slide. So day one would cover the transatlantic slave trade, the institution of slavery, and then have expert testimony to give a primer on national reparations efforts and the international law framework. And then day two would cover the impetus and implications of the Great Migration. So the lack of political inclusion, economic disempowerment, convict leasing, black codes, and other forms of racial terror. So these are the 2-day topics, or the topics that are planned for the next meeting of the California Reparations Task Force. Question one, is there a date that we can share yet? I'm assuming no, but just have to ask for the record. And then two, can you talk a little bit about like what more, or just give us a more of an understanding about what this next meeting really is about to you?
Yes, so in terms of the first question, unfortunately, no, there is no public date that I can share at this point in time. But please be on the lookout for that. And for the second question, can you repeat the second question? Sorry.
Yeah, just really simply like, these are the.
Oh, what is this going to be about?
Yeah, like in your mind, yeah.
Yeah, so again, if we had adopted the California DOJ's proposal, the first hearing would be on the institution of slavery and political participation and racial terror. I think that's how they framed it. And so in kind of reworking it, I wanted to kind of tell a story because that just seemed a bit disjointed to me. It just seemed kind of disjointed. Just institution of slavery, racial terror, political participation. I kind of wanted to I want this process to kind of go chronologically, especially in terms of like a public hearing format. And so, our September hearing will be the first kind of meeting where we're not planning. This is like the real thing, right? The first two meetings we were largely planning and pre-coordinating things for the September hearing. So the September hearing would be, like I said, the first kind of real hearing. And so understanding and acknowledging that, again, I wanted to tell a story, start from, the transatlantic slave trade where this really all began. and then talk about the institution of slavery and as it pertains to the American context, to the United States context, and then tell the story about the Great Migrations, because it connects the transatlantic slave trade, the institution of slavery in the South to California, right? You know, we are a state reparations task force. We're serving the state of California, and so we have to also, you know, connect the dots and show the public that we are, like I said, connecting the dots between the institutions of slavery and the slave trade with the Great Migrations and the ongoing harms, which we will then discuss in future hearings. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that. Also, to the folks in the chat, thank you for the amazing comments coming in. Please, again, like, share, subscribe to ETM Media Group. Sorry, I'm a shameless plugger. Last thing for me, you know, what's your vision for this? Like, what do you want to see? You know, what's your vision for what ultimately happens here, right? You know, with this effort, right? You know, what's your vision for this task force? What's your vision for this effort? And then also, relatedly, like, what's your vision in the context of like how this relates to what's going on, you know, at the, you know, national federal fight for reparations?
Oh yeah. So to answer the last question first, I guess I could highlight the text of AB 3121, which I know organizers on the ground like you all, like CJEC, NAASD, worked with then Assembly Member Weber, now Secretary of State, on the language of AB 3121. And one of those provisions that you all championed was that, you know, by no means does anything that comes out of this California Reparations Task Force in terms of our findings or proposals, it does not negate, and I'm putting it in layman's terms, the fight for reparations on the federal level, right? And so just because the state of California, you know, has put a task force together to address the institution of slavery and to develop a reparation proposal, that doesn't mean the federal government is off the hook. And that's language that that you all were instrumental in putting in. And so that's in terms of my vision, that ties directly into my vision, right? Like utilizing this task force as uniquely, you know, we're in a unique space. We're using this task force as a stepping stone. We're providing a framework for how reparations could and should look on the federal level, because we know the federal level has way more resources than any state in this union. So that's really my vision, is to, I don't know, really take up the mantle as if this is a federal commission, because we're leading the way. Yeah.
All right. Before we go on, we're actually pretty close to wrapping up. By the way, can you believe an hour flies by?
Yeah.
That was fun. There's actually a couple of comments. If anybody on the panel would like to answer, one of them is from Miss J. Ray 22. Can the commission study how Prop 209, the repeal of affirmative action in California, impacted Black people in California regarding jobs, housing, and education? Great question.
Yes, that is a great question. And again, speaking for myself as an individual, not as a task force, but I will say in the public hearing schedule that we implemented, Proposition 209 is a discussion point. It's in that schedule. So yes, we will be talking about Prop 209. Yes, and thank you for your comment. I liked how you framed it.
All right. And just for folks who for the folks who don't know, Prop 209 was an amendment to the California Constitution that happened back in the middle 90s, like 96, that basically outlawed affirmative action. You know, we've said, you know, it basically outlawed a Black agenda, basically, you know, and then there was Prop 16 last year that tried to overturn Prop 209 and bring back affirmative action here in California, and that failed. But that's Prop 209. Prop 209 changed the California Constitution back in '96. Back in '96 to say no affirmative action allowed.
All right, and a couple more things before we wrap it up here. It looks like reparations over everything. Not too sure who this person is, but looks like there is some kind of reparations march being planned. So if anybody's in Northern California, go to Reparations Over Everything at Twitter and find out some more information for that. So I wanted to give a shout out to that. And real quick, gotta do a quick plug for the show, because we got to do the plugs. So yes, family, the Political Goat, Sundays at 10 o'clock. Y'all got to come through, family. You guys got to come through. We're going deep. We're diving really deep, especially in the 2022 election, for the agendas that are coming up, because there's a lot of stuff going on. I know a lot of times before elections come up, everybody's like, well, we don't ask for nothing. We don't know what to do. What's going on? Well, this is what this show is about, right? Preparing us, getting us politically educated, especially from the GOAT himself, Mr. Chris Lodge, in the building. That's Sundays.
You're too kind, my good sir. You're too kind. But yes, you're absolutely right. No, come to the Political Go Show, fam. Sunday morning. It's better than Meet the Press. You don't want to watch Meet the Press on Sunday morning, right? You want to watch some black folks talk about politics on on Sunday mornings, right? So come to the Political Go. It's 10 a.m. here on the West Coast, so I think that's 1 p.m. on the East and noon in the middle of the country. Come check us out. Yeah, we had our first couple episodes. We gave you an overview and a sort of a forward view of 2022, right? And then we talked about how it relates to black folks, and then right now we're talking about what does it mean to actually create a black agenda for like your local area. That's right? We don't talk a lot about the process, right, of like creating an agenda that you can actually use, in the actual elections way next year, right? So yeah, the Political Go. Check us out Sundays, 10 a.m. Pacific time. Come through, all right? It's really, really fun. And we try to do it in a way that's entertaining too. So it's not like, we're gonna, bore you to sleep, right? No, it's really, really fun, right? It's really, really interactive. It's really, really entertaining. Big shout out to Yamoya, Kim, they do so much. So yes, come through, the Political Go.
Yes, thank you. And it's in the chat, family. So sorry, you guys got no excuses. We got people in the building right now. Please, just for the sake of whoever you do or don't believe in, hit that subscribe button, family. We really appreciate you. We work hard. Kamilah works hard. Chris works hard. Kim works hard. I kind of think I work hard sometimes, but
you work hard, man.
Family,
you work very hard, man. Okay.
Yeah, I do work a little bit. But hey, man, it's for the people. I love what I do. I've been in media for a long time, and if I can't do it for anybody, I gotta do it for the family. So it is all good. If there's anything, does anybody have anything else to say? Kamilah, do you want to have anything?
Oh yeah, I just say thank you. Also, shout out to the folks listening on Clubhouse. That's super cool.
Clubhouse.
Yeah, this is great. Let's just thank you for the opportunity. Let's stay engaged. Let's do this. Reparations over everything. Yeah.
So speaking of Clubhouse, you have a room on Clubhouse, don't you, Kamilah, if I'm not mistaken? What is that room and how do people find you?
Yeah, I created a club. It's called the Reparations Club. To be honest, I haven't been very active on Clubhouse because they're not paying Black folks for creating these rooms. And it's a lot of labor and it's a lot of anti-Black American sentiment on there. But, I still have the club. It's Reparations Club. Just you can look it up. It's a green icon of Callie House, who is, pretty much known as the foremother of reparations movement in America. But the club is open for everyone and anyone can make a room in there. So it's a resource. So yeah, follow the club and feel free to use it anytime.
Okay, thanks for that.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I've got one thing too, actually. for those of you who are watching right now, yes, I'm looking at you right there. Hey, yes, you can share your comments and your thoughts with the California Reparations Task Force right now. Okay, right now. If you have ideas for Kamilah, okay, you can send them to her right now. Okay, you can send them to the California Reparations Task Force right now. There's an email to the task force. There's a task force website. You can get all of that on our social media, CJEC or ETM Media, and also our website, also cjecofficial.org. But make sure you reach out to the California Reparations Task Force. Share your ideas, share your thoughts, right? Also, there are some community meetings coming up, right? Not just here in the Sacramento area, but also in the Bay Area and also in the LA area and Southern California. We are out in our community talking to folks about this task force, and we're also online and on YouTube talking about this task force, and on Twitter and on Facebook and on Instagram and on TikTok and some other place that I don't know that I'm not saying right now also. So make sure, thank you. Wow. Thank you very much, brother. So this Saturday, that is a picture of me with more weight. I am going to be at what we're calling here the Black State of the City here in the city of Sacramento. And I'm going to be talking about reparations and this reparations task force and trying to get folks involved and engaged in this task force, just like we're doing right now. Okay, so check me out this Saturday if you're in Sacramento. It's at Queen Sheba, Black-owned restaurant on Broadway. Come through. A lot of great speakers there. I'll probably have like 3 minutes to talk because there's so many great speakers. Okay, so make sure you come through, right? And then there are also some really, really great events. I know the LA team, NAACP LA, is doing a general meeting this. I think it's the 29th, so I think that is on Thursday, and they're going to be talking about the California Reparations Task Force as well. And that meeting, by the way, I'll give you a sneak peek. The ARCC team here and the ETM team here in Northern California, we're also doing a community meeting on this task force coming up on August 14th here in the city of Sacramento at Thompson Rose Chapel. It's Black-owned funeral parlor chapel here in the city of Sacramento. And then our team in Oakland is doing a community meeting as well on August 14th at the 81st Street Library. Look out for all the information coming on those two upcoming events. The point of all this and why I'm talking long is for you to get involved. Okay? Get involved in what happens. Kamilah talked about how she wants to democratize and make this an open way to actually be involved in a reparations task force and to set a good example for what happens at the national level next, right? As Kamilah said, this is a stepping stone. We're going to step on this and then we're going to dunk to get reparations, okay? So let's do it, and I'm going to shut up.
All right. Well, thanks again, Kamilah. And if that's it, we will see you in September at the next task force meeting for sure. And until then, fam, pull up on us.